Here's a question I keep seeing online. Are feminists making women toxic toward men? That's the wrong question, not because it's offensive, because it points the camera at the wrong thing entirely. The real question is why two entire generations of young men and women are being shown completely different realities on their phones, and who's making money off the gap between those realities. Stick with me because the answer is not what either side of this fight wants to hear. Let's start with what's actually true. Something has genuinely shifted in how men and women relate to each other over roughly the last 8 to 10 years. That part isn't made up. Surveys keep finding rising numbers of young men and young women who say they're not interested in dating. They cite mistrust and bad experiences shaped by what they see online. So the feeling driving your question is real. What's wrong is the explanation. Feminism as an idea is just the claim that women should have equal legal and social standing to men. That idea hasn't changed. What's changed is the machine sitting between that idea and your eyeballs. And once you understand how that machine works, the whole picture flips. Every major platform runs on one core instruction: keep the person watching as long as possible. That's it. That's the whole goal of the system underneath everything you scroll through. Researchers actually tested this directly. They ran a controlled study comparing an engagement based feed to a plain time ordered feed. The engagement based version pushed far more emotionally charged, hostile us versus them content. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. When they asked users afterward, people did not even say they preferred that content. The system wasn't giving anyone what they wanted, it was giving them what kept their thumb still. Now apply that to gender. Calm, fair, nuanced takes about men and women getting along reasonably well do not hold attention. A clip where a woman says all men are the same, or a clip where a man says feminism ruined dating, those hold attention. Outrage triggers a stronger, faster reaction than agreement ever does. The platform isn't choosing a side, it's choosing whichever side of you gets angrier faster, and then it feeds you more of exactly that. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for people who want a clean villain. This isn't one group being radicalized while the other stays innocent. It's two separate pipelines built by the same mechanism running at the same time. On one side, some women's feeds fill up with content that treats every man as a walking threat. Often is dressed in feminist language, even though it goes well past anything feminism as a movement actually argues. On the other side, researchers have found that boys as young as 11 encounter openly misogynistic content within 60 seconds of opening an app. Most of them aren't even searching for it. It finds them. There's a whole online ecosystem now called the manosphere. It's a loose network of communities built around men's struggles, things like dating, fitness, fatherhood, that often slide into telling young men that feminism and equality have come directly at their expense and that they're the real victims of the current moment. One major men's health survey found that roughly 2 out of every 3 young men regularly watch this kind of content. 2 out of 3. That is not a fringe group anymore. That is mainstream consumption for an entire generation of boys. And here's how it usually starts, because almost nobody goes looking for misogyny on purpose. A boy searches for workout advice or dating tips or how to make more money. The system notices he watched it and quietly starts serving him a slightly more aggressive version of the same topic, then a slightly more aggressive version of that. Within a few clicks, a video about going to the gym has turned into a video about how women only respect dominant men. That turns into a video about how feminism made women ungrateful and confused about what they actually want. Nobody searched for that last video. The path was built one small step at a time, each step barely different from the one before it, until the destination was somewhere the boy never chose to go. The mirror version happens to plenty of young women too. Someone searches for advice on spotting a bad relationship or content about setting boundaries. A few recommendations later, she's watching videos that treat every man as a probable liar, a probable cheater, a probable threat. It's framed using words borrowed straight from feminist vocabulary, even though the actual content has drifted into blanket suspicion that most feminist writers and organizers would reject outright. The label survived the trip, the substance didn't. So, when you ask if feminists are making women toxic toward men, you're only looking at one pipeline and ignoring its twin running in the opposite direction at the same scale, built by the exact same kind of system for the exact same business reason. Why does this feel so much worse than it did 15 years ago? Long term survey data tracking American teenagers since 1991 actually shows something surprising. Belief in traditional rigid gender roles, the idea that men work and women stay home, dropped steadily for decades. Then starting right around the period when short form algorithmic video took over everyone's phone. That decades long trend reversed, not slowly, sharply, and it reversed among both boys and girls, though more sharply among boys. That timing is not a coincidence anyone should ignore. It lines up almost exactly with the rise of feeds built entirely around algorithmic recommendations instead of you choosing what to follow. The content didn't get more extreme because the underlying beliefs of an entire generation suddenly changed on their own. The delivery system changed first, and the beliefs followed the delivery system. Here's the detail almost nobody includes when they talk about this, and it's the most important one. When researchers actually sit down and survey young people about what they want from real relationships, not what they post, what they actually want, the picture looks nothing like the online war. A large survey of people in their 20s found Gen Z men and women hold strikingly similar views about how a modern relationship should work. Most reject the old strict breadwinner setup, most expect to split costs, and more than 70% of both men and women still agree that men should act as protectors in a relationship. These are not the preferences of two generations locked in a war with each other. So there's a gap, a real one. The online war is loud. The actual lived attitudes of most people are much closer together than the discourse suggests. That gap is the clearest proof that what you're seeing on your feed is not an honest mirror of how most men and women actually feel about each other. It's a highlight reel of the angriest 5% on each side, amplified because angry performs better than presented to you as if it's the whole picture. Now, I'm not telling you this is fake or that it doesn't matter because it's bleeding into real life. Recent dating survey data found that more than a quarter of single Gen Z adults said differing political views alone could make them reject a date. More than half of single women said they'd be less likely to date a supporter of the political right. Almost 4 in 10 single men said they'd be less likely to date someone who calls themselves a feminist. Think about that last number again. Resentment is running in both directions at comparable scale, not one gender targeting the other. Both groups have been trained by the same kind of system to treat the other side's identity label as a red flag before they even meet the actual person behind it. Ask yourself who actually gains from you and the opposite gender distrusting each other. Not feminists, not the manosphere either. Really, not in any lasting sense. The platforms gain. Every minute you spend angry at a stranger's video about the other gender is a minute of attention that gets sold to an advertiser. The conflict itself is the product being sold, and you are not the customer in that transaction. You're the inventory. If feminism vanished tomorrow as a topic, the algorithm would not get gentler. It would simply find the next fall line to mine for the same reaction because the profit motive driving this has nothing to do with which idea is available to exploit. It has to do with which idea reliably gets a reaction. Gender happens to be one of the most reliable reactions there is because it's personal to literally everyone watching. It's worth noticing too that this isn't only a problem for the two people who don't end up dating because of it. When an entire age group starts treating half the population as a category to be wary of by default, that doesn't stay contained inside dating apps. It shows up in classrooms where teachers now report an uptick in casual sexist remarks among students who pick the phrase up online without fully understanding where it came from. It shows up in workplaces where colleagues carry a low background suspicion of each other into meetings that have nothing to do with gender at all. It shows up eventually in who people are willing to vote for, hire, or trust with responsibility because the resentment doesn't politely stay inside the app where it was manufactured, and nobody designed this outcome on purpose, which is almost the most unsettling part. No executive at any of these companies sat in a meeting and said, let's make men and women hate each other. Nobody had to. The system was told to maximize watch time, and it found on its own, through nothing but trial and error across billions of recommendations, that mutual gender resentment was one of the most efficient ways to do that. The harm wasn't planned, it was discovered the way water discovers the lowest point in a landscape simply by following the incentive downhill. So, is modern feminism making women toxic toward men? No. What's making both genders more suspicious of each other is a business model that figured out around the same time short form video took over that mutual resentment between men and women is one of the most profitable emotions it can manufacture at scale. Feminism didn't build that machine, neither did the manosphere. They both just fuel the machine learn to burn. The actual fix isn't picking a side in a war that's mostly happening on your screen and barely happening in real living rooms. It's noticing that the war is the product. It's recognizing when a video is engineered to make you angry at half the population And it's remembering that the data on what people your age actually want from each other looks far more hopeful than your feed is letting you see. If this gave you a different way to look at your feed, that's the whole point of putting it out there. See you in the next one.